and welcome to Pipes and Pondering. So, obviously, over the past few months and also the past few years, we've had a lot of political turmoil with people name calling and stereotyping. And because of that, I've really been pondering a small riddle that I've come up with. And that is, what do a Tardis, a book, and a person have in common? Now, at first, this might seem like a bit of a nonsensical question, but the answer, if you especially know what a TARDIS is, that should be a dead giveaway. A TARDIS, for those of you who don't know, is the spaceship in Doctor Who. It is the blue telephone booth that is just a standard telephone booth on the outside, but you go inside of it, it's this huge spaceship and time travel machine that allows the Doctor to get back and forth through space and time. And with the TARDIS, it's pretty easy to see that it's larger on the inside than it is on the outside. A book, at first, might not appear that way, right? That overall, it's pretty simplistic, but whenever you open it up, you realize that it has thousands upon thousands of words. And then when you start to understand what those words mean, and then on top of that, even additional interpretation of those words and the story that they formulate, it shows you that a book, while a relatively small item, actually is far larger and is far more significant than it just appears on the surface, right? That's where we get our statement, don't judge a book by its cover, right? That a book, you can only at first take a look at it at face value, but it's only once you open it up and then you read it, you wrestle with it, that you are able to really understand what it is about. Also, my apologies if you can hear screaming in the background. My daughter is protesting bedtime currently. With books, though, like I said, it's a bit more difficult to see than the TARDIS, but it doesn't take that much mental processing to realize that books really are larger on the inside than they are on the outside. For people, though, that's something we oftentimes forget, right? That we take someone at face value. That's why first impressions are so important, right? That oftentimes we just deal with people when we meet them initially rather than try to get to know them and understand them better. This concept of them being larger on the inside than on the outside is also true on a biological level, obviously, right? When you actually understand how a person's body works, you realize that it's this complex, multicellular organism. But more importantly than on a biological level, I think that we need to really comprehend that people are larger on the inside on a psychological level. And to an extent, everyone really knows this at their core, right? That we understand that any individual action could actually result from numerous different intentions, right? So if someone does an act of charity, that if they buy a meal for a homeless person, this could be a result from genuine kindness, right? That they actually want to see the betterment of that individual, or it could just be social grandstanding, right? That the surface level really doesn't tell you anything about the individual. It is really what is on the inside that tells you who they are, and it's also a lot more complex, right? That honest kindness has to do with oftentimes usually years of development in order to try to care for someone else over yourself, right? Versus with social grandstanding, that has usually been hardened into a person through, once again, years of acting in a certain way, certain failed expectations in life, and then trying to gain other expectations that are more for personal results rather than the actual good of somebody else. Even though we understand this idea that the outward action can sometimes result from numerous different intentions, that's not how we actually operate in a lot of different contexts because we wind up dealing with stereotypes far too often. And like I mentioned at the start of the video, obviously this is something that has been occurring to a greater and greater detriment over the past number of years, politically speaking. And it's just led to more and more polarization. And to better understand our fellow neighbor, and also to better understand ourselves and to keep society from completely unraveling, we have to be able to look past stereotypes and address our neighbors as individuals. Now, let me clarify and say that this video is not trying to support moral relativity. That you can understand that there needs to be a healthy dialogue and understand that people are coming from multiple points of view because of their experiences, and still realize that there is a true right or wrong, right? This is me just trying to help us to have that dialogue so we can hopefully come to a better understanding of that truth by, once again, not dealing with stereotypes. But with those stereotypes, far too often we do hear statements about how people put each other down based on various factions, right? Whether they are Democrat or Republican, whether they come from the South, right, or they're up north, or they're out west, right? That, or what sort of religion they adhere to. That you hear these individual minute factors, and oftentimes we make holistic character assumptions about that person. And there's really no way to accurately do that, first of all, because obviously people from the South or people from up north, and even Democrats and Republicans, can vary widely on a number of issues. And it is foolish just to assume because of one factor that they must believe X or they must believe Y. And when we relate to others based on these stereotypes, we forget that they are infinitely more complex than even books are, right? That a book, even some of the more complex ones, only have so many different interpretations, right? But a person has to have so many more variables, right? So many more things that made them who they are. And to judge a human by their cover, so to speak, greatly misses out on understanding exactly what makes them tick, right? Why are they the way that they are? And we understand this whenever people stereotype us, right? That as soon as somebody stereotypes us, we realize, no, that doesn't really understand me at all. That doesn't depict me at all. Just one little tiny facet, right? But that's by no means the extent of my being. However, we oftentimes go and then we stereotype somebody else, right? And commit the exact same error that was just perpetrated onto us, right? And so the best way to fix stereotyping is to start inwardly, right? That if somebody stereotypes you, don't just automatically write them off, but be willing to speak to them, right? Show them that either their stereotype is wrong, or maybe that they need to have a better understanding of why you hold a certain position, right, on any sort of issue that might disturb them. And on the same note, be careful when you stereotype others, right? Because whenever you stereotype someone else, you are putting them in a box that is far smaller than they actually are. And the only way to honestly get to know somebody else is to be able to have an honest debate. And that starts inwardly by admitting that you don't completely know everything about that person, because their exterior and their initial persona is far shallower than who they actually are. If, on the other hand, you do wind up just holding stock opinions of your particular political party or your particular region, ask yourself why you hold just those stock opinions. That as humans, we're not made from molds. That we each have our own variations on various topics. That we might think about might generally hold the same view as a certain political party on one thing, but we'll still have minute differences of opinions. And ask why you are following cultural talking points. Because if you are really convinced of all of those points, understood, you've worked through that rationally and have better figured out your perception. But if you're just accepting others' viewpoints, then ask why that is. Why you aren't analyzing the world around you. Why aren't you analyzing yourself and getting to know yourself better? Because ultimately, the only way that we can have any exterior dialogue with others is to have a better internal monologue, that we can better understand who we are. And so, kind of to wrap us up, whichever category you fall into on the political spectrum, if you're generally more left-leaning or more right-leaning, don't base your interactions on cookie-cutter stereotypes, especially in these next coming weeks and the following months with who knows what's going to unfold. Seek to understand those that are different than you. That even if obviously you don't agree afterwards, that's okay. That is actually a part of democracy, right? Is being able to understand, yes, we have very different opinions on something, but we can still choose to love each other. I'd like to wrap us up with a quote by G.K. Chesterton, or I should say a paraphrase of a quote. He talks about how democracy is really like a conspiracy in some ways, that you realize that the person next to you who seems wildly different actually has very similar attributes to you, right? Everyone is searching for safety, for security, for love, for belonging. And the closer you look at them, you realize that you're actually more similar than you are different. And as long as we can understand that, there's at least a hope to democracy, to realize that what binds us together is what is common between us. It's only when we only focus on what is different between us that divides us. So let me know in the comment section below, what do you think about all this? I know everyone has been more than a little angsty for good reason, as politics has been unfolding, especially the last few months. But I hope this video has been helpful to at least try to bring people together a bit more. Even if we aren't able to vote exactly the same, I hope that we can at least strive for better communities and better relationships through this. Cheers.